Dinosaurs and man, two species separated by 65 million years of evolution, have just suddenly been thrown back into the mix together. How can we possibly have the slightest idea what to expect? Well, Dr. Alan Grant, you've clearly never played a game called Dino Crisis. Most likely because you've actually lived the nightmare, and that you're a fictional character from a movie from 1993. Therefore, you're not real.
Alan!
But that's beside the point, because today we're going to talk about what does happen when dinosaurs and man and woman are forced into the mix together because of a genius lunatic called Edward Kirk. Dino Crisis was originally released on the PlayStation 1 in 1999. The game was directed by Shinji Mikami, the same person who was behind the first Resident Evil game.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
Even though everyone, including myself, has been guilty of saying, it's just Resident Evil with dinosaurs. After replaying the game and doing a deep dive into the story for this video, I can confidently say it's not. Shinji Mikami classifies Dino Crisis 1 as panic horror instead of survival horror. When you play through the game, you understand why pretty quickly. You go up against these ruthless monsters that outclass you in almost every way. The weapons you're given are flawed. The point of the game is not to shoot everything in sight like it is in Dino Crisis 2. No, instead you're meant to be fearful of what you're up against, or at least able to outsmart them by not panicking when you're being attacked. Dino Crisis 1 is nothing like its sequel. It's slower. It requires strategy and planning. It's smaller in scale, both presentation and overall experience wise. It's contained to a single facility that is quite large in retrospect, but it's grounded in its storytelling in a believable manner. Now, I'm not trying to say back in 1999 that they thought in 2009, when the game takes place, this could happen. But when you compare it to Dino Crisis 2, or the game we don't talk about in public, Dino Crisis 3,
No! None of that! Shame on you!
you can tell a lot of care went into making the story of Dino Crisis 1. Because of this, the gameplay takes a bit of a back seat compared to the overall plot. Does the game suffer because of this? Most definitely. This game was a fucking slog to play through. Before you take your safety off the keyboard and start firing rounds into the comments section about how I was probably playing this wrong, yeah, I probably was, but I don't give a shit. I understand what the game was trying to portray, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. If I fire a gun at something, why does it take me 20 goddamn rounds to put the thing down? But, once again, that's how the game was designed. You're not meant to fight everything. You either run away from the danger or you outsmart it. The official guidebook to the game states that you can technically go through the game without firing a single round, which I call bullshit on because there's certain parts of the game that you need to fire your gun, otherwise you end up like this. So, if you're simple-minded like myself, and you think gun plus dinosaurs equals kill, you're probably going to be in for a bad time. They do fix this issue in Dino Crisis 2, and they do it in an amazing way. The game knows why you are here. You want to shoot dinosaurs, and you want to have a good time doing it. But we're not here to talk about that right now. We're talking about the first game. Because I made a promise when I originally released my Dino Crisis 2 plot interpretation video on my old channel back in 2022.
As a kid, all I wanted to do was shoot dinosaurs. I didn't give a fuck about third-party data. I've mentioned it multiple times throughout this video but failed to explain it. That'll come in the Dino Crisis 1 video.
Every time I tried to make this video, I would find something else I would rather do, like make a video about Linkin Park and the Terminator, survive Judgment Day, and overcome this nightmarish future thanks to John Connor. That's because Badman JC rounds up a posse and mashes up that bomber-clot Skynet. Or why when I die, I'm going to get a Viking funeral, and I better have a copy of Metal Gear Solid on my person when they send me to the big black parade in the sky.
Maybe there was still a chance to save her. No.
And yes, I am going to have a Viking funeral. I'm going to make sure that shit's in my will. Anyway, it's not going to be my problem. I'm dead. That's going to be someone else's issue. Okay, we're getting way off track here. Let's get started about talking about the story of Dino Crisis 1. It's 2009. Michael Jackson was dead. Farmville was just released to the joy of every old person on Facebook. That poor lady got her face ripped off by a chimpanzee. Don't Google it, trust me, that audio will haunt you for the rest of your life. Dragon Ball Evolution came out, and the Black Eyed Peas would terrorize the music world with songs such as Boom Boom Pow and I Got a Feeling. So even before Harambe, we were already on track on being on the darkest timeline. I am convinced that Shinji Mikami is a time traveler. He knew all of this was going to happen, which is why he made Dino Crisis take place in 2009. Don't quote me on that. The entire story of DC-1 takes place on Ibis Island, which is a part of the Borginian Republic. We don't know much else about the Republic. Hell, the entire island could be the Republic, but it's really not that important because it barely has any relevance to the overall plot. An unnamed government sends 4 secret agents to the island to apprehend and exfiltrate a scientist called Dr. Edward Kirk. Who is Dr. Kirk? Well, he's a massive prick. There, that's all you need to know. Okay, fine. Dr. Kirk is a world-renowned NG researcher. In the early 2000s, he rose to prominence at the age of 25 due to his theory about third energy. As fossil fuel and nuclear energy could be classified as first and second energy, third energy is meant to be a cleaner alternative with unlimited potential. By the way, get used to hearing the words third energy because I say it around 49 times in this video. So, Kirkina published his theory on this and was awarded a government contract because of it. Even though Kirk had the funding and the means to potentially prove his theory, other theoretical physics experts considered third energy as technologically impossible. Dr. Kirk had a bit of an issue with this, and he didn't take the criticism too well. Bitch! Because of this, the government distanced itself from the project and ceased his funding. Luckily for Kirky Boy, the Borginian government was interested in his work and offered to finance the project in exchange of being able to use third energy as a potential bargaining chip. Dr. Kirk agreed to this, seeing as he really didn't have any other options or interest from anyone else. So, in early 2006, he manufactured an explosion at his laboratory and faked his own death, as one does, and unlike Tupac, he didn't move to Cuba, but instead to Ibis Island. The Borgie Boys then funded the project in secret and quickly built a new third energy reactor. When the time came to do the first experiment with the reactor, it would end up failing, but not like failing in the sense of you failing a science experiment at school. No, this failure involved the deaths of 150 people and vaporized a testing ground. This caught the attention of the unnamed but heavily implied government, the ones that had originally funded the third energy development project. The higher-ups for said government were now paying attention to what was going on Ibis Island. As a side note, this accident gets classified as the first official overdrive event. 3 years would pass after this incident. Seeing as no other reports of attempted experiments are listed within the game or external sources, it's safe to say Dr. Kirk and his team spent that time trying to fix the original issue that appeared to have caused the first overdrive. They do this by creating a better initializer and stabilizer, or trying to. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about what third energy is or its components right now, because trust me, there's a lot more background information that I need to get through, so let's keep this moving. At some point before the game takes place in July 2009, 2 things happen. The unnamed government sends out a secret agent named Tom. He's hired under the guise of a researcher. He's able to confirm that A, Dr. Kirk is still alive, B, that he's continued the research on third energy, and C, that he's still a massive prick. The secondary event, which is the catalyst to the overall events of Dino Crisis 1, is that the Borgie Boys demanded another experiment to take place as soon as possible. There were apparently many delays in the improvement of the stabilizer and the initializer, and they were getting tired of waiting for results. However, to avoid a catastrophe like last time, they do make an attempt at putting as many security precautions in as possible. On the night of the experiment, most likely a few hours before the game starts, the attempted experiment takes place. Calling it another failure would be an understatement. Unlike last time, the entire facility doesn't get vaporized. At first, it goes fairly well. Due to the improvements made in the energy consumption and output of the initializer, they were able to avoid that outcome. However, something else ends up taking place, due to the stabilizer's improvements being minimal at best. And since the Borginian government wanted results due to their underlying true purpose of Third Engie research, they technically do get a result. But it probably wasn't the one they were expecting. I think that's enough previous ominous backstory for now. Let's get to the beginning of the game.
You have mail.
Dino Crisis opens up with a report from Tom. He gives a summary of what he's discovered during his short time as a researcher on the island. First, there appears to be no official weapons program. Second, the facility is close to finishing a major project. Third, Dr. Kirk is still alive and a prick. And of course, the project in question is about Third Energy. We then learn some very basic information about Kirk Lonzo that I already went into autistic levels of detail earlier. But then we're given our mission, to capture Dr. Kirk and to repatriate him from the island. The game then starts showing some more objectives while fading out to black. But I don't think we're meant to learn about that just yet, or ever, unless we get a specific ending. More about that later. During the storm that was most likely caused by the experiment that took place earlier that night, a helicopter flies onto the screen. Inside are 4 espionage agents from the Secret Operations Raid Team, or SORT for short. They begin disembarking while the game does a terrible job at telling us what the fuck is being said due to poor mixing quality of voices, sound effects, and music. But I assume it goes a bit like this.
I got a feeling.
Okay, wing your scale off this thing now. He's gonna sing the entire fucking song.
Hey, has anyone seen Dragon Ball Evolution yet?
Yeah, it's shit. What did you hear about the woman who got her face ripped off by a chimpanzee? Don't Google that shit.
Yay! Hey guys, wouldn't it be funny if I just landed in the wrong area? Can you imagine?
Stop being a dumbass, Cooper, and get to the LZ.
We're then introduced to the team. Gale, the angry one, Rick, Hackerman extraordinaire, and Regina, arguably one of the best female leads in a video game ever made.
Baby girl.
Baby girl!
Regina and Rick are worried that Cooper isn't around, but Gale isn't waiting for him. Gale is 100% business, but the rest of him, that's 10% luck,
20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50%
PTSD. Yes, Gale suffers from PTSD. That's because of a mission that he did back in 2002. 4 out of 6 of his team members were killed, so he tends to prefer to work alone because of this. That's why he comes off like a bit of a dickhead. Moving on, we find out that Cooper has landed further away than his team than intended. While moving along in the jungle, he hears some concerning sounds. So he makes a run for it. We're then introduced to the star attraction of the island, the Tyrannosaurus Rexus. It doesn't take very long before Cooper is introduced to the inside of the T-Rex's stomach. He was apparently going for the world record on the quickest death on Ibis Island after arriving. We then get an awesome shot of the T-Rex a-wooing into the night sky. After that, we're then taken to another part of the island where the team has successfully entered the outskirts of the facility. Gale starts waving his dick around as the team leader. He then immediately notes that something is wrong. Rick cracks a joke about the guards probably partying a little too hard. Gale checks the gate, condescendingly tells everyone to stay put, and then goes to check out if there's any more guards around. Rick and Regina then chat shit, before waiting for Gale's signal to follow him. Once Rick and Regina are on the other side, Rick says he's going to sneak in and get to the control room. Rick is our friendly neighborhood hackerman, so anything security related we'll be relying on him for. Quick side note, everyone on this team is meant to be an espionage operative, yet none of their weapons have any noise suppressors on them. For a team that's supposed to get in and out undetected, why does Rick have a gigantic rifle? Never mind the fact that Gale's using some mutant AR-15 carbine rifle that has no stock or buffer tube. Who the fuck approved their loadout? Anyway, Rick fucks off, leaving us in control of Regina. Equipped with a Glock 34 and no suppressor, she walks over to Gale, asking if he was the one who went mental on the fencing. Gale is in CSI mode, reviewing the scene. He states that the brass from the bullet casings is still warm, and that this most likely happened not too long ago. Whatever happened here ended real quick by whatever attacked the guards. The two discuss what could have caused this, which ends with Gale telling Regina to look around while he continues to investigate. Regina then finds a key for the backup generator in the next room. When she goes to find where the key can be used, Rick radios in to let her know he's made it into the control room, but the entire place is deserted and there's no power. He then asks if she can get the power running from the backup generator on the same floor. Gale catches the end of the transmission. Regina mentions that she's found a key, which Gale then takes and tells Regina to follow him. As she makes her way through the outside of the facility, she stumbles upon Gale going CSI mode, this time with an actual body.
The God Almighty! The God Almighty! They killed him!
Regina responds accordingly.
That's disgusting.
Then they discuss what could have caused this. Gale states that the man's intestines were ripped out, and Regina mentions that it was probably due to an animal because of the teeth marks. They then make their way towards the generator door. Gale tells Regina to head inside while he stands guard outside. Once she's inside, she finds that the batteries for the generator need to be reordered and activated. Once she's done, she attempts to make her way outside, but hears gunfire followed by more concerning sounds. Seeing as Gale was just outside, I'm sure he's fine, he's a big man, he's got this. So she gives Gale the space he needs to work through whatever he's going through before going to see if he's done. Once she's outside, the bloodstains on the floor lead her to a hole in the gate similar to the one that she found before. Thinking that Gale just swanton bombed off the island, she looks over the edge and calls for him. Her calls for Gale leads her to almost meeting a similar fate by the creature that most likely attacked him. As the thing parkours across multiple crates, it lands and formally introduces itself to Regina and the player. Instead of fighting it off, she instead runs back to the exit.
Let's go to spy witness! He is broken in half!
Regina manages to narrowly escape the raptor by exiting the area. However, her new friend isn't done talking, so he jumps over the gate to join her. She then learns that tank controls aren't exactly what you want for a game like this, and once again barely escapes with her life by heading through the other gate. Once she's on the other side, the Velociraptor realizes it can't jump that high and needs to level up its dunking skills. So it goes to grind for XP. Immediately after this, Rick conveniently calls Regina. Seeing as the generator is back online, he's finally accessed the system. Regina, understandably panicked, mentions that she's lost Gale. Rick answers accordingly.
So what's the bad news?
Regina then tries to not sound like a crazy person by explaining that she was almost killed by a dinosaur. Rick, understandably, oh wait a second, would he have not seen the raptors in the building because he's surrounded by cameras? I'm willing to believe he didn't see any on the way in, but at this point, there's no way he's not come across any on all those screens in the control room. Anyway, he's still skeptical about what's going on. The two go back and forth like this for a while before Rick finally tells her to stop smoking crack and come meet him in the control room. Regina then enters the facility. She's startled by the sound of a raptor on the prowl. Seeing as there's no other way to get around, she heads up the vent opening to make her way to the control room. Once she gets there, she finds Rick, who says he's managed to get access fairly easily. When asking about what's going on, Regina re-explains the situation about Gale being attacked by a raptor and his whereabouts being unknown. Rick says that they should get the fuck out of here.
White folks are dead, we're getting the fuck out of here! Let's roll down, man! Let's go, motherfucker!
But Regina's a professional, and no Cretaceous period animal is going to stop her from completing the mission. This is where we find out that Cooper, the guy who got om-nom-nommed by the T-Rex, was the only one who had a radio for the team. Which, why? Whose genius plan was that? Why is there only one radio between 4 people? Well, 3 now, which honestly proves my point. Anyway, Regina notices that there's a bunch of monitors that are still out. Rick mentions that it's for the underground area. Regina deduces that this means that not all of the facility has regained power and that there must be more backup generators for the basement area. They both agree on dealing with this afterwards and doing a sweep of the ground floor that they're currently on. Regina is tasked with locating the Doctor and bringing him back to the control room. I mean, based on what's already happened, I'm pretty sure that's going to be simple. Heading to the management room, we find a shotgun, a shiny button for us to press which turns on the PC, bloodstains, and something called a digital disc key, also known as DDK. There's usually 2 of each, and they're used to unlock some doors within the facility, which by the way, I say DDK at least 26 times in this video, so that should give you an example of how many times we come across these things. Regina then exits the room, which leads to another call with Rick. He tells her that he's unlocked access to some of the laser shutters that we keep coming across, but because Regina is a straight up gangster, she runs towards the door beside the Raptor. Since the Velociraptor hasn't watched that bit in Jurassic Park, he can't open doors. After reviewing some questionable posters in the room, she then picks up a DDK and then reads the memo on the table. It tells her the code for a locker in the management office, so guess where we're going back. After finding out Rick did not unlock all of the gates, she swiftly manages to avoid the dinosaur before returning to the office management room. Following the bloodstains leads to the owner of them, as well as another key. The giant safe thing requires the code we just found in the other room. Regina enters it and is awarded with the key to the main entrance. Before leaving the room, she checks the computer that I turned on earlier and discovered what the DDK system is, which is definitely not something that's unnecessarily complicated as a password system. Anyway, she takes the wrong exit before taking the right one back into the hallway. Being the agile tank-controlled cat that she is, she manages to unlock the gate as the dino gets clapped by the laser. She then runs past it and then turns it back on. Then she stands there for a while, watching as the poor bastard keeps trying to get to her. When she mocks the Raptor, she gets instant karma and decides it's time to keep moving. Regina enters a large hallway. Seeing as the key that she got from the other room mentioned that it belonged to the entrance, she uses her noodle and uses it to open the door. Once outside, she can't seem to jump over the lamppost. Even though this game is not exactly like Resident Evil, in this sense it is, which means even the smallest item in your path means you have to go the long way, which she does, and ends up making a new friend. She picks up another DDK and then pillages the body. She notes that the blood is leading from the blue door in front of her. She decides not to be curious about it and heads back to the main hall. Back in the main hall, she runs up the stairs. She also magically knows to push the giant box in front of her, because she definitely isn't using a guide for this to save time due to there being multiple endings. She then picks up an item and makes her way through the door. Regina then rudely awakes a sleeping Velociraptor. She then has to leg it for the end of the hall to the door that leads to the passageway to the communications area. Once she's outside, there's a door on the right that leads to a small room. Regina checks the notebook. She then learns more about this stupid DDK system and how it's definitely not a really dumb way to keep things secure. After reviewing something that's probably going to come in handy later, she heads back to the hallway with a sleeping dinosaur. She disturbs it once again before heading to the lounge. She's then met with its partner, who's clearly upset with the other dinosaur and needed a moment before he said something he didn't mean. She then hears the door open because it turns out the dinosaur that was in the hallway did watch Jurassic Park and knows how to open doors. She decides to give them space to work things out, and then unlocks a safe to get the handgun parts. Adding them to a gun, she gets too excited and fires off a round. This sadly frightens the two dinos that were trying to work things out, and they decide to start mauling Regina as she tries to defend herself. This doesn't go as planned, so she decides to do a save state reload. This time, she kills the first dinosaur because she knows their marriage isn't going to last anyway. It turns out, the husband is actually sleeping with a babysitter, so Regina just decides to save them the trouble. She then goes into the lounge and decides to get justice for the dinosaur she just murdered by killing the unfaithful husband. She then unlocks the safe, and finally gets to play with her modded handgun in peace. Heading back outside, she spots a lock on the door to the left. Deciding to check it out, she ends up being able to use 2 DDKs from earlier. Once trying to use them, she immediately regrets it, as it's basically a dyslexic's worst nightmare. However, she overcomes her dyslexia and definitely didn't use a guide for this. Upon unlocking the door, she meets her first survivor. The scientist gives Regina the panel key 1 before dying. After mourning the loss of her new friend, she finds a DDK and then spots 2 strange medals. Before she has a chance to investigate properly, she's introduced to the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Seeing as the Nando's was closed on the island, the T-Rex decides to settle for a recently dead human. Regina has the most casual 90s response to it,
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
instead of, screaming. She equips her shotgun and manages to ward off its attack each time it tries to ruin its diet by going for seconds. Eventually, it realizes it would be a waste of all that effort. And anyway, there's a cheat day coming up. The T-Rex fucks off to do some cardio and burn some calories. This leaves Regina questioning her life choices for a while. She then uses the 2 panel keys to reveal a safe. She correctly guesses the code and is awarded with the key card L. Exiting the room and heading back to the first floor on the main hallway, she ends up attempting to enter the set of doors opposite the entrance. Rick calls to mention that he saw something human looking in the training room. He then tells her to go check it out. Entering the elevator room reveals another dead body and an item box. Regina decides to make some anesthetic round to help the Velociraptors take a less permanent nap. After saving the layout to the facility, she then unlocks the door in the room to be led to the lecture room hallway. As she makes her way through, she's ambushed by 2 Velociraptors. Using her thinky brain, she runs back to the lasers that she just unlocked and hides behind them as she puts them to sleep. Then she runs down the hallway to the lecture room. At the front of the lecture room, she finds a key and ends up being attacked by a venting dino. Just before she's killed, Gale comes and saves the day. While they converse, Gale seems to think what he just killed was a big lizard. Which, what kind of fucking lizard grows to be that big? Anyway, he says that his radio is broken and decides to go harass Rick to get it repaired, not bothering to mention how he survived the attack from earlier or anything. Regina then leaves the room to head back down the hallway. She ends up dodging the raptor that just woke up from its nap and then goes into the office. Checking the red file on the desk starts to explain more about what's been happening on the island. This is where we find out about the experiment from 3 years ago that I mentioned earlier. We also learn that someone has been using the terminal in the current room to make fake IDs to gain unauthorized access to some rave parties. Then some bullshit about having a meeting that could have been an email instead to make sure the room's always locked. Soon after this, one of her raptor friends from earlier attempts to thank her for the nap. Deciding that it needed a longer nap, she uses a poison dart to lull it back to sleep. Aw, aren't they so precious when they— oh wait, did I say poison? God damn it, Regina. Anyway, unlocking the other set of doors leads us back to the office hallway from the beginning of the game. Since Regina found the key to the B1 backup generator, she heads back to where Gale first came across the shell casings at the beginning of the game. She then heads down the ladders to deal with another puzzle. Upon turning the generator back on, Rick calls her and asks her to come back to the control room that he's in. Making her way back ends up with another sneak attack from a raptor.
Meow meow, nigga.
After introducing some new holes into its body, she successfully reaches the control room. Gale and Rick end up being there. Gale says that he saw something human move in one of the underground monitors and then asks for Rick to open the shutters leading to the underground. After this happens, Regina gets a distress signal on the radio. They think it's Cooper, but unless he's calling from the inside of a T-Rex's stomach, it's not him. Rick then realizes that it could be Tom, the undercover researcher, and that he might be in trouble. Gale and Rick get into a lover's quarrel and then decide to go for a trial separation. It's now up to Regina to decide who she wants to go with. We're gonna go with Gale's choice and then cover Rick's. So, let's go looking for Dr. Kirk. When she exits the room, she heads to the left where the shutters were closed earlier. She then takes the stairs towards the basement. At the end of the hallway, it leads us to a bunch of Compsognathus. Compsognathi? A bunch of compies eating a raptor. Heading into the medical room, we find a key card on the table. The memo explains to Regina how to use it, as it's required to enter the strategy room. Heading down the hall leads us to Gale. We finally get to see Dr. Kirk in person. Realizing that he's been rumbled, he tries to leg it and closes the shutters. However, Gale knows some sick roll, so he's able to get through before they fully close. He calls Regina and tells her that he's on the doctor's tail. Regina states that she can take the elevator to get to him instead. From here, Regina decides to put the keycard she just found into use and goes to the strategy room. In here, she finds a fingerprint copying device, as well as a document that explains how it's meant to be used. It basically lets you store someone's fingerprints on it, but you can only store one set of fingerprints at a time. She also finds yet another DDK, because that shit isn't getting old anytime soon. Once she's done snooping around, she makes her way to the beginning area of the game to the backyard. Rick then calls Regina, letting her know that Tom's been found, unalive. Rick then says that he's going to head back to continue working on the system. This leaves us to continue and enter the large elevator passage. After dealing with 2 raptors, she finds some slag shells and a resuscitation pack, so I'm sure whatever's in the next room isn't going to be a massive concern. She's almost immediately attacked by a pteranodon. Regina gets lifted to the sky and barely escapes being slammed against a wall. Once she recovers, she picks up her gun and then runs to the large elevator control room. She then finds a DDK on the desk and then the second one on Tom, who's still very much dead. She exits the room and gets the outdoor map and then heads to the passageway to the power room. Using her dodging skills, she then heads to the next room, heads down the ladder and picks up the B1 crane card. She then has to solve a puzzle to get the generator back online for the elevator outside. On the way back to the elevator, one of the pteranodons gets ballsy and tries to attack and drop Regina into a giant fan. Regina manages to escape and then watches as the dumbass redecorates the area with new paint. His mate didn't seem too fussed about it and decides to keep vibing in the sky as Regina heads back towards the elevator. Turning the large size elevator on, it leads her to a new area called the Carrying Out Room B1. She then realizes that she has to do another puzzle with a menacing looking crane. After figuring out how to clear the way, Regina comes across a memo talking about the DDK we just found, as well as how Tom's been snooping around asking a bunch of questions. Heading through the double doors leads us to the underground hallway. As she tries to get to the other door, she is rudely attacked by a velociraptor, who's then kicked into the area it just jumped out of and electrified. Exiting through the doors leads us back to where we lost Dr. Kirk. Yo, what the fuck? Oh wait, right, the elevator. Regina then makes her way to the main entrance and to the elevator room. From here, the game continues, but before we do that, why don't we find out what would happen if we decide to go with Rick instead? We're now in rescue mode, and our target is locating who made the distress call. Regina makes her way all the way back to the beginning area of the game. She spots Rick and then follows in the same direction he's going in. After dealing with 2 raptors, she's then led to a large elevator section in the open. She's then also attacked by 2 pteranodon. One of them is so happy to see her, it decides to pick her up and attempts to slam her into a wall. She manages to escape but then heads into the control room. Here she finds Rick and a severely injured Tom. Tom states that Dr. Kirk's experiments have nothing to do with energy development. I'm guessing tonight's surprise dinosaur party gave that away. Anyway, before he passes out from his injuries, he gives Regina a DDK. She then finds another one on the table. When you examine Tom, Rick states that he'll take care of Tom's injuries. This then leaves Regina to exit the room and find a map to the outside area. She heads down a winding path, dodging 2 of those flying bitches along the way. Entering the next room leads to a ladder. She takes the ladder down and picks up the B1 crane card. Regina then has to get the generator up and running by solving a pipe puzzle. Once this is done, the generator turns back on. This now means that she can use the huge elevator she came across before when being attacked. Heading back there involves being attacked by another pteranodon. She avoids being turned into spaghetti and instead watches her attacker get turned into ketchup. She runs to the elevator to activate it. She then heads back to the area where Rick and Tom are. Rick ends up making a nondescript reference to Jurassic Park before they descend to the lower level.
So you saw the beast, right?
Yeah. Pteranodon, wasn't it?
I meant you saw that it was a real dinosaur. It's unbelievable.
Didn't I tell you?
This is just like that movie.
The 3 of them then make their way to the carrying out area at the B1 level. In the next room, their path is blocked by a bunch of containers. Regina says that she'll handle it by using the crane to clear the path for them to continue forward. Rick tells Regina to continue with the mission and that he'll take care of Tom. He also suggests for her to engage in fisticuffs with Gale if he gives her any more shit. Exiting the room leads us to a cutscene with Rick and Tom. It turns out a raptor was taking a nap in the medical room. Tom pushes Rick out of the way as the cutscene ends.
You on this?
Regina continues down the hallway, seeing a group of Compsognathus nomming away at dead Raptor. She then finally makes it into the room that Rick and Tom are in. This is where she finds out that Tom died while saving Rick. Rick, disheartened, leaves after stating he'll be back in the control room. Regina then reads a file that talks about the ID card on the table that will lead her to the strategy room. Making her way out of the room and up the stairs, she goes to the control room to check on Rick.
What? Oh, I don't see any signs of Doc here.
He's a little out of it. Deciding to leave him be, she heads to the strategy room. In there, she reads a document that explains the use behind the FC device. It's the item that's right beside her. It can help her create keycards as long as she has some type of fingerprints to copy from. Picking up the machine, she also gets a hold of another DDK. Once she exits the room, she makes her way to the main hallway and then the elevator room. When attempting to access the elevator, the ID card that she has doesn't seem to work. So, she puts that FC device to use. She does this by doing a little bit of identity theft with the dead guy that's beside the map. By taking his fingerprints and then going back to the office just by the lecture hallway, she's able to use the computer to rewrite the ID card. This in turn allows her to access the elevator. I can't imagine this being difficult to figure out without a guide because this just seems so straightforward, doesn't it? Heading back to the elevator room, she then used the ID on the elevator. While going down, she has a close call with a Raptor who was hitching a ride. She manages to deal with it before getting murdered. She then comes across a memo that states that the DDK system down here has been updated to also be numerical. She then uses 2 DDKs to unlock the double doors, which then leads her to the B1 main hallway. After roaming around for a bit, Regina then eventually makes her way towards a research meeting room. Besides picking up another DDK, she finds a memo which is actually a journal from a researcher who goes into detail about third energy. March's entry is something that explains to us that third energy is something that can produce an infinite amount of energy from, wait for it, air. No, really, that's it. It's air.
Air. I'm in them like airs.
Okay, so that's not the whole story, but we do learn that third energy was being developed for military use because, of course, why wouldn't you try to weaponize air?
Air.
The researcher who wrote the memo clocks onto the idea that this might not be a good thing. The military has been giving them a lot of leeway for the development of the new energy system. Because honestly, I'd be pretty fucking concerned if my country's military was more than happy to throw money at some dude who said that he can produce infinite amount of energy through air. And no, I'm still not over the fact that third energy equals air. I know it's more complicated, let me just have my moment. The researcher then goes to state that he wants to find out the true purpose of the project before irreparable harm is done. I mean, it's a bit too fucking late for that, mate. But it's good to see that at least some people on Ibis Island had a brain to say, hey, maybe this is a bad idea. Last time we tried doing this, a shit ton of people died. Anyway, April's entry explains that the researcher hasn't found any more clues, but has concluded that Kirk is a genius, he's also a massive prick, and that Kirkisha has probably figured out there's a top secret investigation going on about him. On top of all of that, he probably has a lab on the current floor that we're on, and the only way they're going to find out what he's up to is by finding the lab. In July's entry, we find out that one of the researchers has found a clue to the location to where the secret lab is. Seriously, 4 months to find a clue that there might be a secret lab on a single floor. Anyway, he says there's a clue in the secret place inside the library. Before ending the memo, it goes on to say that Dr. Kirk has been having secret meetings with Colonel Clay. Which, by the way, what type of fucking name is that? Is he friends with Private Plado and Petty Officer Plasticine? Moving on, the only other door in the room is locked, so Regina makes her way back to the hallway to the computer room. Using the keycode we found earlier, it can be input to the computer, which then unlocks the mysterious door we just couldn't get through a few moments ago. So Regina heads back there to go through the mysterious door that leads her to the gas experiment room. Heading towards the large window shows us that some sick bastard has trapped a live scientist in there. Regina manages to save him, but he's too far gone. After giving her a key chip, he passes. When exiting the gas room, Regina is attacked by another raptor. She manages to trap the raptor in the gas chamber before exiting. She then makes her way to the library room and then uses the key chip on the computer at the end of the room. Solving the small puzzle gives us access to one of the lockers. After picking up a scope for the handgun, Regina picks up a keycard. The memo that we find mentions the key from the chief's room, the one that we magically already picked up when we were attacked by the T-Rex for the first time. So lucky for us, we can use both keys. To do this, Regina has to go back to the computer room. When attempting to use the key to unlock the door to the lab, it turns out it needs 2 people. So Regina calls Gale, who then helps her use a keycard at the same time as her. After doing that, she then has to do another DDK puzzle. She then enters the experiment simulation room. In here, we get to see what 3rd NG looks like. I mean, I'm not fucking impressed, but whatever. Regina then reads Kirk's journal to find out the outcome from the experiment. It turns out their attempt at controlling 3rd NG didn't go quite well. The improved initializer ignition device had enhanced the NG efficiency. However, there's not been enough sufficient progress for the stabilizer safety valve since the accident from 3 years ago. He then goes to talk about even if there's a small amount of uncertainty about controlling the energy, all of this would be for nothing. In the experiment that took place tonight, their attempt at restraining power through the use of the stabilizer was insufficient, so technically a failure. The failure resulted in excess energy being spread to around the radius of 3,300 feet. Dr. Kirk then goes on to state that the military may still be pleased with the result, even though technically a failure, the giant creatures, aka the Dino Boys that turned up, is technically a result. But Kirky Boy is planning on leaving through the bottom floor as soon as he's done analysing the data. After finding some shotgun parts, Regina then goes back to the computer room. When she gets in there, Gale's pissed that Dr. Kirk still can't be found, and that the operation is taking too long. Right then, the emergency lockdown system gets activated. Rick calls to ask what the hell is going on, and then asks if Regina can resolve the matter. Regina then opens up an electric panel and requires her to solve yet another puzzle to override the lockdown. Once this is done, Rick informs the duo that the area that they're currently in is now packed with raptors. Gale wants to personally introduce freedom to each one of the dinosaurs, whereas Rick suggests that they need to take the hatch in the doctor's lab. Regina is once again forced to choose between her 2 dads. We're going to go with Gale's method first, and then we're going to cover Rick's after. Regina shoots her way through the underground, making her way through the library, and then ending up at the main hallway. From here, she's required to get into the hallway for carrying in materials. Regina barely manages to get through the entire ordeal unscathed. By the time she catches up to Gale, she finds that he's found Dr. Kirk. It's probably worth mentioning that Gale was probably going to kill him or do something worse, like make him watch Dragon Ball Evolution on repeat.
And so it has remained for thousands of years, until now.
No!
The first rule is...
Stop it, please! I beg you!
Dr. Kirk then lives true to his reputation, that he's a massive prick. No surprise there.
Relax, Agent.
He's obsessed with reviewing the final results of the experiment. Gale tells him to get fucked, and that they're going to call an escape chopper for extraction. Dr. Kirk bitches about his rights before roasting Gale.
Then shoot me, idiot, you lame, flat-top, jaw-headed...
Gale then threatens to shoot Dr. Kirk if he doesn't hand over the communication room card. Gale then tells us to go towards the heliport as he's got some unfinished business to attend to. Regina pulls off a classic Solid Snake move by repeating the same thing.
Unfinished business?
And then we're told to go towards Rick's location on the map. But before we do that, we're now going to do Rick's unnecessarily overcomplicated method. Regina heads back into Dr. Kirk's lab. She attempts to unlock the hatch that requires Regina to memorize the letters of a puzzle and enter in the code. That's because the code rewrites itself as a security measure. She has to do this 3 times and can only make 2 mistakes throughout the entire thing. At this point, she's not surprised due to the other amount of pointless crap that she's had to do puzzle-wise. However, she manages to pull this off and then successfully escape. She then ends up at the carrying out room B1, conveniently coming across Dr. Kirk. She approaches him, explaining how they're representatives of their nation's government, which is a little confusing because he sounds British.
My nation? I'm touched.
Now, unless he's American, doing a British accent to sound more evil, which I mean, fair play, it does make you sound evil as fuck. Not that I know anything about that. Anyway, Gale rolls up and tells Dr. Kirk that he's coming with them. Dr. Kirk then says how his study is in its final stages and how he can't leave before he's analysed the results. Gale tells him to get fucked and that he's coming with them. Kirk complains, and Gale basically tells him to shut the fuck up. Gale wants to head to the communication room and forces Dr. Kirk to give him the key card for the elevator. He then lets Regina know that he'll meet them at the heliport once he's done with some unfinished business. This leaves Regina to do a Solid Snake impression.
Unfinished business?
And then makes her way back to the control room. Once she arrives, she uses the ID card on the elevator door to go down to the communication room. After snooping around for a bit, she picks up the antenna key from the emergency box next to the locked door and then heads straight through it. She then goes to the antenna room and then activates it using the key she just found. This means that the team can finally communicate with HQ. However, we have to go back to the communication room to do this. Once she's outside, the ground starts to shake. Even though there's not really a facial animation, I love how the game manages to portray how Regina knows what's coming next. It also turns out that the locks on the floor that she's on have automatically activated. Rick calls at the worst possible time. Regina explains the situation, and then Rick says he'll get on it. So, Regina has to survive by running down the walkway and hopefully not getting caught by the big bastard. When she reaches the end, the door is still locked, so she has to keep dodging the attacking T-Rex, or this happens. Somehow, she manages to fend off the T-Rex's attack and somehow is able to get into the room without becoming a late night snack. Once she's in the communication room, she successfully contacts the helicopter pilot and then tells him to come to the heliport for exfiltration. Before heading down the elevator, Regina's contacted by Rick, who tells her that she needs to head to the main entrance to reach the heliport. On her way there, she's attacked by multiple dinosaurs, but manages to escape without getting any damage. Well, probably not psychologically at least. Anyway, once she's in the hangar, she manages to find a grenade launcher, which means that she's probably going to fight the T-Rex again. Regina then has to rearrange some boxes, and then is able to successfully get to the heliport. We're then greeted by Rick and Dr. Kirk waiting for the helicopter. Gale is nowhere to be found. Rick even mentions that he hasn't heard from him. Thankfully, the chopper arrives so the team can finally get off this hellhole. Regina then notices a bunch of Pteranodon flying away, wondering what could have freaked them out. And that what smashes through the compound wall. I love how the pilot asks what is that to the T-Rex, when come on man, what does that look like, a fucking goose? Anyway, the Cobra Chicken destroys the chopper and Dr. Kirk decides to run for it. With the T-Rex's attention on Regina, Rick attempts to repair the control panel of the elevator, which means that Regina has to keep the T-Rex occupied, like she's some dinosaur babysitter. She uses her dino dodging skills to avoid being killed and fires off a few rounds from her new toy in celebration. Rick eventually manages to fix the control panel. He then helps Regina by firing a single round from his gun. Cheers, mate. He then calls Regina and the two of them finally escape. In the elevator, the duo come to terms with their situation, realizing that getting off the island is starting to look like a grim possibility. Regina remains positive. The elevator, however, seems to be busted once they reach the underground floor, now having to figure out an alternative solution to exiting. The duo move on. In the next room, Regina's reintroduced to a bunch of compies. Managing to run around them by dodging, she then enters the materials room, only to realize that the holes in the walls means that her new friends don't quite understand personal space. She then manages to pause time and read a memo besides the cadaver in the room. Regina discovers there's actually another way to get off the island, a boat located in the port at B3. She then picks up the CEO card and then heads back towards the elevator. Rick finishes fixing the control panel for the elevator and they make their way up. Once the elevator reaches its destination, Regina informs him about the boat. They then converse about Gale still missing as they make their way down again using the use of the large elevator. Once they reach the bottom, there seems to be some issues with the power in the area. This is when Gale finally reaches out. We find out he's on the B3 level and the power's gone. Well, thanks for the update, Captain Obvious. They then notify him of their new escape route, and he responds by telling them to get the power online. Once they exit the elevator and look around, they find out that one of the batteries for the generator is completely busted. Thankfully, Regina finds a usable battery in the next room and then gives it to Rick. He then turns the power back on. Rick then tasks Regina with dealing with their escape route while he handles the security system. Heading to the B3 control room allows Regina to pick up 2 crane cards before she speaks to Rick. He explains that the security is pretty tight, so she leaves him to it. She then exits towards the general weapons storage room. She then sees a DDK next to a dead body, but then as the music signifies, we're about to get jumped.
Oh, homie, you done fucked up now.
This is where she's introduced to a new type of dinosaur, the Therizinosaurus. She then narrowly escapes being squished by a crane. Regina then takes out the 2 attacking dinos before heading through the large shutters. In the next room is another dinosaur, as well as the CO key and the final crane key that Regina needs. She heads back to the weapons storage room. She then heads up the ladder, places the crane cards in the control panel to rearrange the containers that are blocking her way. Once she's done this, she's able to successfully pick up the DDK from earlier. From there, she makes her way back to the main hall B3. She then uses the CO card that we found earlier to unlock the door. Walking through the hallway, Regina is attacked by 2 more of her new friends. Heading up the stairs, she ends up in another hallway, where she meets a raptor and then enters the security pass room. Entering the room leaves holy fuck, look at the state of that. Anyway, running forward activates an alarm. Then it shows a cool visual of what appears to be a body scanner of some kind. After turning off the alarm, Regina then reads the memo on the desk. It talks about preparations for another possible overload like the one that happened 3 years ago. The staff are really starting to question Dr. Kirk, mainly as his validity as someone reliable or someone trustworthy. Spoiler alert, he's not, and he's a massive prick. After picking up the B2 key chip from the wrecked body, Regina exits, enters a ventilation shaft that takes her to the experiment room hall. From here, she enters the researcher's restroom.
Gale!
Yeah. Well, at least Kirk's running out of places to hide.
Gale is just standing in the middle of the room. The way he acts is so strange. It's like you caught him wanking and he just says the first thing that comes to mind before he leaves. Regina then snoops around, and then reads another journal that shows more disdain for Dr. Kirk. The last message in the memo is pretty interesting because I'm pretty sure it was written by Kirk himself. Workplace drama. Don't you love other people's messy shit? Heading back into the previous hallway, Regina discovers the key card level C. When attempting to use the door behind her, she's attacked by a new type of raptor. She takes it out, then enters the stabilizer design room. Here she finds another DDK. Since she now has both of the ones that she needs, she starts looking for where they can be used. Before exiting the room, she finds another memo. This one explains the process of the experiment that took place earlier that night and how it should be conducted. From here, she makes her way back to the central stairway. At the bottom of the stairs, Rick calls her to let her know that he's opened some of the shutters. She then ends up at the rest station and then uses the DDKs on the door. Upon entering the disembarkation immigration office, Rick joins her. He begins tapping away at the computer, stating that it's going to take a while for him to open the door to the port. Right after, the corpse in the room ends up getting a call on its radio. It turns out a survivor has the key to the port but is being chased by a dinosaur. Rick mentions if they don't get the key, they're fucked. Regina is super pleased about this. She then picks up the key chip and then races to the main hall B3. Once she gets close to the elevator, the sound of someone getting killed plays over the AP system, followed by the elevator descending. Once it opens up, our mate the T-Rex pops out and starts fucking things up. He crashes out quite literally, and then is electrocuted, so he takes a nap. Regina has to now remove the battery from this generator since the T-Rex destroyed it, and bring it back to the original room she got it from. She gets the backup generator working, and then goes to find the port key, as well as a DDK. She then makes her way back to Rick and the stupidly named room. Regina throws the key to Rick, who does fancy typing to unlock the port door. However, once they get to the hallway, there's an air pocket of 3rd NG blocking their way in the hallway. Rick then throws a coin into it, only to watch it disappear. Seeing as they now needed to get around this, Rick heads back to the other room, so he can pull as much data as he can from the computers. Regina picks up another DDK, and then makes her way to the security pass room to unlock the DDK door. Regina walks onto a device that scans her entire body. She then enters the experiment room hall, and then makes her way to the stabilizer experiment room. After fighting a raptor, she finds another DDK and shotgun parts. Regina then heads back to the security pass room, uses the 2 key chips, solves a puzzle, and then updates one of the key chips. From here she heads back to the part storage room and then unlocks the door using the 2 DDKs. This leads her to the passageway. She then uses the 2 key chips to unlock the 2 large doors, which ends up leading her to the 3rd NG area B2. Once she gets in there, she sees the 3rd NG generator. Regina calls Rick to let him know that she's found what they're looking for. Rick then asks her to activate it, which of course is going to be super easy. When she tries to, she's told that the procedure is incomplete, so she enters the next room. She heads down the set of stairs to read more drama between the researchers. She then grabs a level B keycard. Heading back up the stairs, she comes across more notes. This time, it tells her how to activate and control the generator. The main thing that she learns is that she can't do it without Dr. Kirk's ID card. She then takes the door to the power frequency room. In there, she finds an injured female scientist on the floor. As there's no way to really help this person, she continues to move. Checking the panel on the wall to the right of her comes across yet another puzzle. Once she solves it, the lockdown is removed, allowing us to play with a shiny machine in the next room. She then checks the memo on the desk. It ends up telling her that the researchers had wiretapped the room that Kirk and the military officials would have meetings in, but they've also figured out what his ID code is. All they need are his fingerprints. After she's done snooping around the room, she heads back to the generator room to try and start it. The simulation is successful, but she's unable to start the generator without the special key card, which is most likely Kirk's ID. She hits the machine out of frustration,
Fucking Windows 98!
and then hears a gunshot from the other room. When entering it, she realizes that the unconscious woman from earlier has been killed. She then heads down the hallway to the other door, hearing someone attempting to escape. Regina makes chase and spots Kirk attempting to run away. When she enters his lab, he gets a jump on her and holds her hostage. They have some back and forth. Regina calls him a freak, he calls her dumb, and before he can kill her, Gale comes to save the day. Rick is then informed that they've found the doctor. The scene then cuts to Dr. Kirk explaining what took place earlier on the island in the night before they arrived. He initially thought that Third Engi had the ability to transfer selective space to an alternative space-time continuum.
But I was incorrect.
It wasn't transferred. It ends up being exchanged. You know, like how your real parents did with you at the hospital. He then calls Gale and Regina stupid, and then goes to explain that Third Engi can change air from the present to another time period entirely. So, swapping air between time periods is still air. He can call it space all he wants, but we know the truth, and he's a prick anyway, so no one cares about what he thinks. But yeah, he actually managed to create a time machine through the use of Third Engi. Anyway, he figured this out tonight during the experiment. It turns out, when the experiment took place, another overdrive happened, and since about 65 million years ago, dinosaurs were occupying the island. That's how they ended up in the present. So there, that's it. He swapped air. The air from the past had dinos. They came around and fucked everyone up. Regina calls him out for being a murderer. However, he makes a good point by saying that the people who died did die in a pretty sick way. If my death was caused by a dinosaur, I'd be okay with it. But he's still a prick, and he proves this by calling himself a god and how he didn't care about anyone who died, only his experiment. He then explains that they need to destroy the vortex that's keeping them from the port. The only way to do this is by allowing the generator's Third Engi levels to overload. By doing this, in theory, the Third Engi and the vortex would cancel each other out if they come into contact with one another. However, if they can't stop the overload, the island may be shifted to another point in time-space continuum, which is something they find out the hard way in Dino Crisis 2.
Fuck you!
Gil says they'll be somewhere else when it happens. However, Regina states that they couldn't even get it started. Kirk continues to be a prick by stating that they're missing the initializer and the stabilizer. At first, he refuses to tell them where it is, before Gale threatens to shoot him. He then tells them that they're in the security level A rooms on the 3rd floor. Rick manages to finally appear. He then states that he's going to create a program that will send a stream of Third Engi into the vortex. Gil says that he'll keep an eye on the doctor and that Regina needs to be the one to go find the two devices and start the overload. Rick, however, says that the floor is flooded with dinosaurs. He offers her the planning disc, saying that he has the draft plans to create their own initializer and stabilizer and that he came across it when searching the database. He also says that the room where the parts are stored isn't too far from here. Gale says Regina is too stupid to figure it out, or who even knows if the parts are actually all there. They'd be better off dino exterminating and getting to the original devices. Rick says that she'll die. Gale then asks Regina to choose one of the methods that she wants to go for. Like last time, we're going to do Gale's first, then Rick's. Regina first goes into the room where Dr. Kirk is being babysat by Gale. When speaking to him, he gives a snarky comment on whether or not you found the devices yet. Sadly, Regina can't pistol whip him, so she does the next best thing, stealing his fingerprints using the FC device. After being told by Gale to get moving, Regina goes to the parts storage area. She then picks up some parts for her grenade gun, and then heads towards the destination on B3, while of course fighting off raptors and anything else that comes along her way. When Regina finally arrives at the special weapon storage, she finds a memo in the next room over, and it ends up explaining the concept of Third Engi. I'm gonna be honest, it's just some bullshit explaining that energy is extracted from the ions from the atmosphere. The ions get ionized, and the electrons get electronized, and then they make love and have a baby called Third Engi. Dr. Fuckhead then goes on to state that when it goes through this process, it isn't actually able to return back to its full form, and there's a byproduct similar to ozone that remains. but apparently not enough for 3rd Engi not to be considered as clean energy. Whatever mate, you and your Cretaceous period air can fuck right off. Back to the story. Regina has to take an elevator to the lower floor, and then picks up the stabilizer and initializer, exits the room, and then goes to start the generator. That's it, that's all she has to do with Gale's method. Now compare it with the bullshit we're about to go through with Rick's dumbass method. So Regina is given the planning disc by Rick before he runs off. Gale heads into the next room to guard Dr. Kirk. Before leaving, she reviews the memo on the table that talks about how 3rd Engi can be used as a weapon. I'm going to read this as it's presented in the game. If the 3rd Engi reaction exceeds the critical point, it evokes the overload phenomenon. When this happens, we can't control it. The huge amount of Engi creates chain reactions and begins to disintegrate the surrounding air. The ensuing explosion will vaporize anything within the vicinity. If we could control the area where the overload occurs, the 3rd Engi could literally become the ultimate power. The power of the weapon depends upon how much Engi we can restrain before the explosion occurs. In other words, the capability of the stabilizer is the key to everything. The 3rd Engi was supposed to be the project of the development policy, create the basic power source for the permanently stationed weapon. If we change the policy of the weapon here and now, this government will be able to obtain the most destructive device in the whole world. However, our current budget is completely out of the question. You'll find my estimate of the budget in the next chapter. Please review and consider. After reading this, I'm surprised Regina didn't pistol whip the prick. But instead, she takes his fingerprints via the FC device and makes her way to the parts storage area to start this headache. Once she heads into the storage area, she heads into the first room to pick up some grenade parts to customize the weapon. She then inserts a planning disc into the terminal in the center of the room. The system then asks her to enter a code. The code can be found by pushing the shelf and then checking the blue light to hear the recording between two scientists. At the end of their conversation, she hears a bunch of beeps that determine what numbers need to be input, based on the sound of the keys on the computer. Yeah, this is dumb and I really didn't want to do this part, but I have to because I hate myself and I need to make sure I covered as much of the game as possible. Anyway, she figures out the code and then gets the core parts 1 and 2. From here, Regina makes her way to the stabilizer design room. She uses the planning disc on the huge machine in the corner, which gives her the protect parts 1A and 2A. She then gets the protect parts 1B from the other computer in the room. From here, she heads down the hallway to the other stabilizer design room, and then gets the final piece she needs, the protect parts 2B. She then uses the giant machine in the middle of the room to assemble the parts to create the stabilizer and initializer. Making a single mistake during this process requires her to start from the very beginning. This definitely didn't take a bunch of tries. Anyway, once she's successful, she takes the stabilizer and initializer and then starts making her way to the security pass room. Once she arrives, Regina creates the ID card using Kirk's fingerprints and his code. From there, she has to go to the 3rd Engi control room. She then executes the startup request on the same computer as before, and she's able to successfully start the process thanks to the ID card. Regina then runs back to the 3rd Engi area B2 room, crosses the bridge, and places the stabilizer in it. She then goes down a floor and does the same thing on a similar machine but inserts the initializer. Before heading back up, she has to activate the computer beside the initializer. Once she's done that, she has to return to the area with the stabilizer and is able to successfully activate the 3rd Engi generator. Once the generator starts powering up, it immediately warns them that it's approaching critical levels. Regina runs to the control area. This is where Rick calls her and tells her to set the power output to maximum. She does this and the 3rd Engi overload begins. We're finally at the endgame section because there's no way to undo the overload once it starts. The game then cuts to what's happening in Dr. Kirk's library room. Gale notices the ceiling beginning to shake and pushes Kirk out the way. A large pipe then falls on top of him, leaving him gravely injured. Dr. Kirk, who's still a massive prick, shows this by laughing at Gale before escaping. Before he can escape, Gale throws a tracking transmitter onto the doctor before passing out. Regina makes her way to where Gale is, not knowing that Dr. Kirk has escaped. She then helps him up and then makes her way towards the stupidly named room. When they enter, Rick is monitoring the overload situation. He then realizes Gale's hurt. Regina says she has no idea what happened to him, even though there was a huge pipe laying on top of him when she found him. Anyway, the 3rd Engi rift disappears from the exit to the port, which means they can finally escape. Rick says that they need to leave right now. Regina asks about Dr. Kirk, which Rick responds with telling her he doesn't care and that they need to escape. Gale says otherwise and that he's going after the doctor. He tells him to leave without him if he's not back in 30 minutes. At that point, Rick turns to Regina to make a choice. Now, we're given 2 choices like always, but we actually have 3. There's technically 4, but they both end in the exact same way as the third secret ending. We're going to first do Rick's ending, then Gale's, and then the third secret ending. Regina knocks Gale out, Rick picks him up, and then takes him towards the exit. Regina follows suit and then makes her way towards a port. Then, the hovercraft storage room. Once she gets in there, Rick tells her that the hovercraft needs repairs and fuel. Regina offers to get the fuel. He throws her the container and tells her to go fill it up. She heads back towards a port, uses one of the containers to fill it up with nucleum, and then heads back to the other room to give it back to Rick. However, the ceiling begins to shake again, meaning that their old friend the T-Rex wants to give them a proper send-off. Regina says she'll handle it. Rick throws her a few helpful items before she goes to fight off the dinosaur. The T-Rex practically explodes through the large gate. The grand entrance causes some debris to fall in front of the exit, as well as triggering another lockdown. Regina has to keep running around the port, firing off shots at the dinosaur once it gets too close. This goes on for a while before the final FMV begins to play. Rick rolls up in the hovercraft. Rick fires off a missile at one of the fuel tanks, which is filled with some nuclear material by the way. Anyway, Regina uses the distraction to get onto the hovercraft. They then begin to speed off as the overload finally takes place. The explosion begins to swallow everything in the area. While this is happening, the T-Rex attempts to give chase but is consumed by the explosion. When it looks like the hovercraft might follow the same fate, the trio manage to successfully escape. We're then shown that a huge chunk of the island is now missing, as it's been transported back to the Cretaceous period. The team then drive off into the distance as the credits begin to roll. At the end, Regina gives a final update about the mission. Kirk is missing, Gale has managed to survive even though he was seriously injured, Rick is still alive, and of course Tom's still dead, as is Cooper, and Regina is ready for her next mission. So that's ending 1 out the way. Let's go to ending 2, Gale's choice. Choosing Gale's option will start with Gale walking out. Rick protests, but Regina says that Gale's a professional and all he cares about is completing the mission. Rick finally relents and tells her to hurry up and get Kirk. The map shows that we need to head to the special weapons storage room. Regina makes her way there, noting that the T-Rex is no longer taking a nap in the main hall. I assume that's not good. Anyway, when you finally get there, a badly injured Gale has Kirk cornered. Gale knows he doesn't have much left in him, so he gives over the third energy data disk to Regina. It contains all the data on third energy and how to weaponize it. He then explains that's what their real mission was. Kirk laughs when he realizes that he was right about the government. They didn't give a fuck about him, all they wanted was the data. Regina realizes this and is far from impressed. Gale then shows his true colours. He didn't want to tell them because he didn't want to put them in additional danger, and the fact that he did it to protect them.
You're right. Let's go, Gale.
Gale then sadly passes. Kirk takes this moment to be a massive prick.
And this is the reward for a lifetime of service to the government. Sad, isn't it?
And then gets punched in the face. Good job, Regina. Regina and Kirk head back to Rick. Rick finds out that Gale's dead and is understandably upset. Rick and Kirk then make their way to escape. Regina follows by going to the port, only to realize the T-Rex somehow ended up here but died along the way. Or did it? Anyway, she makes her way to the hovercraft storage, as we find out that it's actually not dead. Everyone gets into the hovercraft and starts making their escape. Regina and Rick show grief over losing Gale, sitting in silence. Suddenly, the entire ship begins to jerk, because the T-Rex apparently took some swimming lessons and is now here to make sure they don't leave without saying goodbye. Regina heads out to the back of the boat and begins blasting the dino each time it gets close. After this happens a few times, Rick tells Regina to get down as he fires off a rocket at an overpassing bridge. The final FMV begins to play. They start joking around only to have the T-Rex appear from under them. Rick then starts to drive off, leaving Regina to climb out the window and launch a remote grenade into the T-Rex's mouth. She finally gets to say the one-liner she's been waiting to say since they saw the first raptor.
You're extinct!
She activates the grenade and watches it perform instant dental surgery on the T-Rex's mouth. The dino finally dies as the trio escape to safety and the credits roll. Regina then gives her final report. Dr. Kirk survived and is now negotiating with top brass with new experiments on third energy. Gale died during the mission, as did Tom, and Cooper. The contents of the third NG data disk are currently being reviewed by R&D. Regina then ends a report letting her superiors know that she's ready for the next mission. Now it's time for the third ending. You can get to it a few different ways, but the outcome is exactly the same, so we're going to go with my preferred one. If you choose Rick's ending, Gale still gets knocked out. However, if you look at the transmitter that Gale gave you, it shows that Dr. Kirk is in the special weapons storage room. Making your way there, once you get through the main hallway before the control room, Regina notes that the T-Rex isn't there anymore. Once checking the transmitter again, we see that Kirk's moved to a new location. We then head to the area where the general weapons storage room is, but instead we take the door in front.
Yeah, G!
She then steps onto a weird transporter and then is taken to another heliport, one that has a chopper waiting and Dr. Kirk. When attempting to sneak up on him, her radio goes off. Kirk quickly turns around, and before he can shoot her, Regina hands out a nap with her foot. Rick is freaking out on the other line, saying that the T-Rex destroyed the hovercraft. Regina lets him know there's another way out, and they start making their way towards her as she takes the weird transport thing back to the other section. Once she gets there, Rick and Gale are being chased by the T-Rex. They board the weird transport thing, and the T-Rex gets stuck under the door while it's closing. Rick then activates the transport. As they take off, the T-Rex manages to break loose and starts chasing them. Regina then has to fend off the T-Rex with her grenade launcher. After doing this a few times, they manage to arrive. She stands guard as the others board the helicopter. The final FMV begins to play. It shows Rick piloting the chopper. However, the T-Rex attempts to stop them from escaping. Rick keeps trying to outmaneuver the T-Rex, but somehow it's keeping up with them. So he decides to use the gigantic bomb that's attached to the helicopter. The bomb drops on the T-Rex, who presumably dies, and they finally escape to safety. The credits roll, and then we're shown Regina's final report. Dr. Kirk is working with the government to perform third NG experiments because no one learned anything from this entire experience. Gale and Rick are still alive, Tom and Cooper are still dead, and Regina is ready for her next assignment. So, that was Dino Crisis 1. Now the main question most people have here is which one of the endings is canon. Officially, there's no real answer. According to some people on the internet, it's supposed to be ambiguous. I, however, feel otherwise, because I think there is an official ending, and we find out the answer for it in the Dino Crisis 2 official guidebook. From the Dino Crisis wiki, and yes I know, but it's the only place I could find a translated version of the guidebook, there's a Q&A section, and one of the questions asks where Rick and Gale are in Dino Crisis 2. The official answer was that they were on other assignments, which means we can eliminate Gale's ending because of this, because we now know he survived. Then, if we take a look at the intro of Dino Crisis 2, we find out that the government continued Dr. Kirk's research. Now, they wouldn't be able to do that without Dr. Kirk, or at least the third NG data. We only get the data disk on Gale's ending. We don't have it on Rick's ending, which I will explain in the next section. So by the process of elimination, the secret ending, where Gale survives and Kirk is captured, is the canon ending. Like last time, I have a couple of questions / observations about the overall plot of the game. Number 1, why isn't the overdrive explosion shown in Gale's or the secret ending? If we choose Rick's choice, which is technically the one that gets us out the quickest, it looks like the third NG overdrive takes place within a matter of minutes. However, if we choose Gale or the other ending, there's no evidence of this happening. I assume it's most likely going to take place after they've escaped, but in the first ending, the timing of it seems so quick, so why don't we see it in the other ones? So in this case, if a third NG overdrive happens and no one is around to witness it, does it really even matter? I guess it's for the sake of telling the story. But if that was the case, I would have personally had the overdrive explosion take place on the 2 endings mentioned earlier rather than the quickest one. Having them escape on the hovercraft immediately after the overdrive taking place, with Regina getting her big hero moment and feeding the remote grenade to the T-Rex. By locking the ending outcome to only one of the endings robs the player of a coherent story. But then again, I am trying to bring logic into a game where the main plot point surrounds air from the Cretaceous period being used as a clean power source. Number 2. What was Gale's unfinished business? At first, you think it's a third NG data disk. But the more I thought about it, it can't be that. Because at the end of the game, Gale quite literally dies to ensure that the team leaves with it. This can only happen if he hadn't already obtained it. Ultimately, Dr. Kirk surviving doesn't matter. not nearly as much as obtaining the data disk. If they have the data, they don't technically need him. Sure, having him alive makes things a lot easier when it comes to getting the experiments up and running again, but it can be done without him. Which leaves the question, what was Gale even doing? Even more questions arise about this when the team attempt to leave the first time via the chopper, because he's nowhere to be found, and the rest of the team don't know about this part of the mission. Would he not need Kirk to obtain the disk in the first place? It just seems strange to have him say he has unfinished business, only for him to require to go after Kirk at the end of the game. And number 3, saving the best one for last. Couldn't Dr. Kirk have escaped at any point after the experiment was over? All of the data that he needs is on the third NG data disk that Gale ends up taking. Kirk says that he stuck around so he can analyze the results, which I assume he could have done literally anywhere else with the data. Sure, it may have been a bit harder due to lacking the exact technology needed to do it, but surely it could have been done, right? Like, why the fuck are you sticking around on an island full of dinosaurs, especially when you have what you already need? We know due to the secondary heliport, he could have left at any point with the other chopper, but instead, the dumbass decided to stick around. And you can't even use the argument that he needed the initializer or stabilizer, because there were 2 already sitting in the special weapon storage room, which is right by the secondary heliport. In theory, as soon as the experiment was over, he could have left just before or as the team arrived, seeing as it looks like everyone else got murdered on the island soon after the experiment. He could have just taken the data, the initializer, the stabilizer, and escaped on the chopper to go sell his research to the highest bidder. The fucking idiot. So there we go, that was the plot interpretation of Dino Crisis 1. We learned that third NG is air being exchanged between 2 time periods. If uncontrolled, it will end up creating an explosion that exchanges time and space in the location it was triggered with something that was from 65 million years ago. We also found out that the real ending is the third one. And of course, most importantly, we learned how much of a massive prick Dr. Kirk is. Which honestly, if you take anything from this video, I hope it's that. As for Dino Crisis 2, well, there's already a video that I go into detail about the plot for and try to explain its ending. After replaying DC1, I can see where some areas could be redone and overall improved on. So that will come in the Dino Crisis 2 revised plot interpretation video. I've been, oh god damn it, did I just do it again?